Thorny, as we venture into the R&R, two truths are consistent. We love our dear Montana state, and we love great beer. And you know who else feels the same? Jeremiah Johnson Brewing. Brewed in the heart of Montana in downtown Great Falls, Jeremiah Johnson takes Montana's finest ingredients to craft some of Montana's favorite beers. And now, Jeremiah Johnson's second tap room is open in downtown Coeur d'Alene. Their Citra IPA is probably one of my favorites. But we all know, Thorny, you're not the hop lover I am. You're more of a mountain man Scotch ale.
Well, Foley, I'm certainly not a mountain man, but you are right. I do love their Mountain Man Scotch Ale. But come game day, you and I are both cracking their Golden Bobcat Pale Ale. So when you're looking for a quality craft beer brewed with Montana roots, a relaxing tap room, or just a six-pack to take to your favorite Bobcat tailgate, Jeremiah Johnson delivers. Make your next beer a Jeremiah Johnson, and as always, go Cats.
And this is a good one. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around, does Robbie Howe get credited for another tackle?
Absolutely, he does. He might even get a sack on that one. I don't know if the tree was behind the line of scrimmage. That's a sack.
Welcome everybody to the R&R Catcast, a fan-based podcast focusing on Montana State athletics. We're two dudes named Ryan from the state of Washington talking about our dear Montana State. We hope you enjoy. Welcome back, Bobcat fans. Well, we're happy to have you on another episode. Thorny, how you doing, buddy?
Feels good to be back, man. I'm doing pretty good. And I do want to mention real quick here, this episode is brought to you by Jeremiah Johnson Brewing, as all episodes are brought to you by them. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm not bad. You know, in the time of quarantine and the absence of football, I feel a little bit of a hole in my heart. But you and I are going to do our best to bring some Bobcat news for our listeners.
Sounds good, man. Yeah, we brought on Paul Schwedelson, our first repeat guest, I believe we talked about. I think he's the first one we've had back on. I mean, we've had Shane Driscoll on a number of times, but I think he's the first media member guest we've had on twice. So it's exciting to have him back on to talk a little bit about, well, I guess it's not exciting news to talk about what is not happening this fall in Bozeman.
No, it's not. But yeah, he comes on and he's going to give us his thoughts. And we thought that Paul would be a little better choice than you and I riffing on the subject. And Paul's a little bit more educated, given he's a writer over at the Bozeman Daily Chronicle. So we just want to thank him in advance again for coming on the show. And on the back end, we filled some Golden Coolie questions, and so we'll bring those to you.
Sounds good. And yeah, you're right. Like, you and I have kind of intentionally avoided talking about the cancellation, the NCAA, like our thoughts on all that, just because there's a lot of other people talking about it, people who understand the situation better than us. But, you know, we had to get around to it at some point. And that's kind of one reason we brought Paul on, is because he knows it better than we do. And he did a good job of kind of explaining some of the things that are happening. So let's get right into it. Here is our guest spot, I guess you could say, with Paul Schwedelson talking about cancellation of fall football at MSU.
Right now, we welcome in friend of the podcast, Paul Schwedelson of the Bozeman Daily Chronicle. Paul, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, appreciate you coming back on. Last time you were on, it was kind of what did we talk about last time? It was basketball. It's kind of a get to know you, how you came to Bozeman, just an all-encompassing thing. This one's not going to be quite as fun because it's not very good news we have to talk about. But thanks again for coming on. Paul, first question we have for you, man, like, what are you up to now that pretty much there is no fall sports?
Good question. Kind of what I've been doing at the paper since March is kind of covering a mix of news and you know, some sports stories here and there, but obviously it's a lot of news going on too, so still able to contribute in that regard. And but you know, just trying to pick up some new hobbies here and there. Working on some Sudoku puzzles recently. So it's been a mediocre replacement, I guess you could say.
No more marathons?
Marathons not in the mix right now. But you never know what the future holds.
There you go, buddy. So, what's the vibe in Bozeman right now, Paul? I mean, kids are coming back to school. We're not there, but you're around campus. How's it feel?
Yeah, I guess this is kind of a separate from athletics specifically. But I was actually on, doing a story on the first day of classes, the first day of the fall semester, and just talking to some students. Um, then something that just stood out to me is just kind of a little bit of some anxiousness, just not knowing whether or not the semester will be able to finish. Montana State went, they've had in person classes, and a lot of those have been modified in some sense to somewhat of a hybrid model where there's, you know, some parts of the class is online and other parts are in person. So, for example, if there's a large lecture, maybe that would be online because it's a bigger group of people and might be more difficult to have the distance between people and have everyone space out. And obviously, bigger groups could potentially pose more risk virus wise. But then students were also really glad that they were able to have at least some classes that were in person. And I think, there's obviously a lot of merit to that. I think everyone kind of just wants to be able to, gather in person as much as possible within reasonable safety guidelines. And so there's a lot of mixed emotions, felt like, from the students that I talked to. And now that's already 2 weeks ago, so I don't necessarily know how that's changed more recently. And I guess we'll have to see how the semester goes, but it's definitely a weird time, and it's I think everyone's kind of maybe in a different place with that and has different feelings and thoughts and emotions, and um, it's just tough because you think of the college experience and just about every aspect of the college experience that we think about, the prototypical American college experience. So much of it relates to large group gatherings in so many different senses, and so many different aspects of life. And so I think that's just a little tricky for a lot of students. And um, we'll have to see how the rest of the semester goes. But like I said, a lot of mixed emotions. It felt like, and it's just a weird situation overall.
You might not know the answer to this. Is MSU expecting like a? Is there a lot of students that aren't coming right now, or is it kind of enrollment kind of where it is expected to be?
Um, I believe it's sometime around now. I guess coming up, probably in the next few days. I believe, and probably closer to an official enrollment number should be coming. I know over the summer there were some projections or different types of ideas that had been reported by the Chronicle, about enrollment numbers being considered strong, but it was unofficial at that point. Um, and I know that it takes at least a couple weeks into the semester to have a better idea of exact enrollment numbers, just because there's so much flexibility at the beginning of the semester of what's going on, and students kind of dropping in and dropping out of classes, just kind of shuffling some schedules around. And so I don't know if I don't think there's an exact number yet, but I believe that should be coming. But like I said, I know over the summer there were some projections that were kind of reported, or just kind of an idea that was kind of floated around, that enrollment would be somewhat similar to previous years, which, obviously the past several years, the enrollment has continued going up at MSU, over the past few years. And it's been a big aspect of the school's growth. And, you think about Bozeman's growth, and MSU and Bozeman are so much tied together in that sense too. So I don't know the exact answer yet, but I believe that, like I said, I believe that should be coming.
Well, hopefully it's somewhere where they're anticipating because MS, like you said, MSU's been growing so much. It's such a big part of the financial success of the MSU. And part of the reason I think that they could survive a season without fall sports or football is because they have positioned themselves just as a university doing so well. So it's good to hear that hopefully they were positive projections, at least in the summer. So interesting to see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, definitely, and I think you're right that just considering the momentum that MSU had in previous years leading up to this point, and we talk about the financial effects of everything going on athletics, and it's like times 10 or times X, however much, when you think about the university overall.
Sure.
And like you said about just MSU had positioned itself, been in a good spot, pre-pandemic.
Well, the big news that came out recently was obviously the move of the football season to the spring. We're going to get into some of that. Our very first question on that is just, do you know the vibe of the football team? We asked you about the vibe on campus. Now we're going to move kind of into the football talk. So how's the team feeling about the prospect of playing a meaningful season in the spring?
Yeah, good question. And I guess my first thing would be, I'm sure that every player has different sorts of mixed emotions potentially, and maybe at first their initial thought might be different than what they feel now, a few weeks removed. But one thing that did stand out, was when the announcement happened. I think there's probably some initial disappointment potentially, just because you mark on your calendar, you mark September 5th season opener. You mark that so far out in advance, and that's kind of a date that everyone kind of shoots for in the off season and everything like that. But I think there was a sense of uniformity in the sense of like, now the players can have another thing to shoot for. And if they had began the season or tried to begin the season, and here we are sitting here in late August, there would still be some serious questions and serious doubts of, can it be finished, and what happens if they have to cancel games or shut down games, or things kind of get weird in the middle of the season and it kind of blows the whole thing up. And it would just be very challenging to have to navigate that. And so I think the players were understanding that while it may not be ideal to play in the spring, at least they have a better chance of having a more complete season. And I know there's still a lot of skepticism about playing in the spring, and I think a lot of that skepticism is extremely warranted. But and all these same problems could still exist in the spring. But at least there's maybe a little bit more of a chance to get through a full season, and to be able to follow along with, especially one of the big things to keep in mind is the requirements from the NCAA regarding testing was really a big factor in the Big Sky's decision to move football to the spring. Just financially, to be able to afford that testing. I know that Montana State AD Leon Costello said he felt like MSU would have been able to handle those requirements, but a lot of other schools maybe not. So we'll have to see how things go. But I think players were a combination. I think they had a combination of feelings of being disappointed and also maybe perhaps understanding, and and I think the big thing too to keep in mind is like the decision to play in the spring wasn't necessarily spring versus fall, but maybe more of like spring versus not at all. And once fall became unrealistic or not possible, then spring became the next best option. And I think a lot of players maybe understood that when that did happen is, at least now there's a chance and there's something else to shoot for. And I guess maybe we'll get into it, but the spring definitely poses challenges too. So
yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about the spring here in a minute. It's definitely a whole topic on its own. But before we get to that, though, you kind of talked a little bit about Leon Costello thinking that, MSU could afford the testing. And that's certainly something that, we'd thought about is like, well, clearly there's some schools in the Big Sky that aren't as financially well off as the Montana schools or maybe even Weber State, but did you get a sense maybe from Leon or even Jeff Choate on their thoughts on kind of the season, kind of their same thing, like their thoughts on bringing the season to spring, or did they want to play in the fall? Like, was that something they were shooting for? Did you kind of get an idea of that?
Yeah, one of the big things that Leon Costello repeated throughout the summer was that he wanted MSU to have something to play for. And the reason what he meant by that was essentially, a shot at playing in the FCS playoffs and, a shot at winning a conference title and a shot at, competing for a national title. And the reason that I think that was something that really stood out as a big factor was just because, the NCAA had that 50% line of that threshold of, if there's less than 50% of the teams playing, then there would be no NCAA sponsored postseason. And so
Passing the buck.
So then everyone was kind of, doing that math in their head, and people were tweeting about, trying to count up the number of teams, who's in, who's out. And, I thought it kind of it reminded me, it's like, if you're ever in that group chat, and you got like 9 guys to, 9 people to play like a pickup basketball game, and you're trying to find the 10th guy, to run full court. It was like the Big Sky was like, maybe that 10th player, and then the Big Sky went down and took the whole FCS with it. And, and then obviously, it became clear at that point, that with the chance of the playoffs moving to the spring. And so, that was a big factor because I think MSU still believed that they maybe could have played, and whether that means if there was an independent schedule or other things involved, like a week before the Big Sky Conference moved the season to the spring, Leon Costello was putting out a statement saying that they were looking to fill the non-conference games that they lost. They were looking to fill those games, and so that pretty close to when it got moved, Costello is looking to add games, or that's at least what he said in that statement. So, I think we've all known for a long time that playing college football this fall was going to be a really big challenge, and so we've known that for a while, and ultimately that's what occurred. But just the breakdown of how it all shook out. Having something to play for was a big factor, just because, the idea of maybe going independent or trying to cobble together a schedule, ultimately that wasn't the way that MSU wanted to go. Just because, like I said, they wanted to have something to play for.
So that's not on the table still because, North Dakota State recently added a game against Central Arkansas. So they're playing exactly one game this fall. So just when you think like NDSU, like they're not playing any games, they say they're not going to play any games, boom, they scheduled a game. Is that on the table at all, or is it completely done for MSU? Even just a one-off, one game that means nothing. It doesn't count against your eligibility. I have no idea how it counts towards any standings.
Yeah. MSU has said they're not playing any games this fall. So okay. that kind of settles that. They may have some practices. I know they had, I think it was 4 practices of what would have been considered like a preseason type practice, or fall camp, essentially. But they called that off after 4 days, and even on the 4th day of that, it wasn't a very intense practice. It was, they were just kind of, doing some walkthrough type stuff, and they may start practice back up, because if you think back to this past spring, Montana State didn't have any practices, any spring ball practices. So they may, maybe start practice back up, and
Kind of use
that
this
time.
as spring ball.
Yeah, exactly. So that may be a possibility, but they won't be playing any game.
So for right now, the spring is scheduled for just a conference slated schedule. Would that conference slated schedule be the same as it is penciled in for the fall?
Good question. I don't know specifically. I mean, I don't know if the I don't know if the copy and paste model is uh really applies, or maybe it does. I don't know the answer to that. I know that in figuring out the Big Sky schedule, and specifically the timeline of the Big Sky schedule, um Big Sky Commissioner Tom Wistersel said in a press conference, part of that depends on when the FCS playoffs would be, and then working backwards from that point. So, if the FCS playoffs start, at the beginning of May, let's again, this is a hypothetical. I don't know necessarily how feasible this would be, and the timeline is also going to be an issue, just between the timeline of playing in the spring and then turning around and playing in the fall. So um, this may not be necessarily realistic. But let's say, just for the purposes of this hypothetical, the FCS playoffs start at the beginning of May, and let's say it's a 16-team tournament, and they target a Memorial Day weekend type championship game. So you work backwards from there. From the beginning of May, if you want to play 8 games, that takes 2 months. So that would mean having to start play either like late February, early March, sometime in that range, to be able to get your games in, and then be able to have that completed by the start of the FCS playoffs. But a big factor in deciding the timeline is going to be the when the FCS playoffs start. So I don't know the answer to your question, but on a side note, that is something else to keep in
Ugh, spring football in Montana. Ugh, gonna be cold.
mind. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it would work. I mean, I know there's on one hand, if they made a deep playoff run, it's cold in November and December. Um, but obviously at that point in the season, a lot of times your practices are probably going to be shorter, and you're really just fine tuning and probably doing a lot of walkthroughs at that point in the season. It's much different when you're talking about trying to ramp up toward a season, trying to navigate that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it'll all work, and um, like I said before, there's a lot of skepticism a spring season could even work, for and 2 reasons stand out. Is just because one is we don't know if the virus situation is going to be better between now and then. So all the same issues that football teams would have ran into this fall could still be equally as prevalent in the spring. Now, obviously, that could be not the case if there's improvements in terms of testing capacity, and the prices, the costs involved, and how quickly you can get those results back, and et cetera, et cetera. But the other issue is just that turnaround from the spring to the fall. And, if they play in the spring, how much does that potentially compromise the fall of 2021? And I know something Jeff Choate said was he was very adamant that he does not want to sacrifice the fall of 2021 just to squeeze in a half-baked spring season.
Would that be if that Big Sky Conference is a go? What would happen if like a school like Montana State just said no, I'm not going to play in the spring? Do you have any idea what would happen in that scenario? Can schools just basically opt out of the conference schedule?
I think they could potentially. One of the first things, actually, when you think back to this past spring, um, as it, or maybe it was the beginning of the summer. I don't know. I can't remember the timing exactly. But the Big Sky came out with a thing where they said schools could be autonomous in their decisions. And the reason I remember that being important was because at the time, a place like California was in a much different place than Montana. And so I thought that made a lot of sense at the time because it's not necessarily fair to other schools in the conference if Sac State can't play, right? If Sac State can't play, that's Sac State's problem, and shouldn't necessarily hold back the rest of the conference. This sounds like, obviously it's a little bit different in the hypothetical you laid out, just because this is kind of more of like a by choice thing. But I think it is similar in the sense, that I think and I don't know for sure. I can't say with any certainty. I don't think any of us really know, all the specifics of how this all would work. But I think there would be a possibility that, if a school didn't want to go, I don't necessarily know if, I don't think they'd be forced to. And that would, I mean, it would be awkward in the spring, but I mean, the spring is going to be awkward one way or the other. So it'd probably be a potential advantage if you think ahead to the fall of 2021.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, we have like one more question on the football season, and it comes down to what is the NCAA saying in terms of eligibility? Let's say if spring ball doesn't happen and there's no football this year.
Yeah, so the NCAA gave every fall sport athlete, an extra year of eligibility. So, if there's no games played, or if there are games played, either way, I guess it wouldn't necessarily count as like a year of eligibility, or they'd have an extra year of eligibility, which is a really interesting starting point for the NCAA. And now it's kind of up to the schools to figure out ways to make it work. Just because that poses a lot of challenges, and there's probably going to need to be more legislation about scholarship restrictions and the numbers, and how they could make it work. And I know a point that Jeff Choate has made is they, between their juniors and seniors, if everyone in both those classes come back, they would have 44 seniors in the fall of 2021. So that's that number would normally be like half as many, or less. And so that's a really big chunk to have all at once in one class. And also, you also have to keep in mind the incoming recruits. I don't know if they're planning on maybe having a smaller recruiting class this cycle, just because they know they're going to be having so much come back. I don't know how they're necessarily managing that. But that's another thing to keep in mind. And, that goes hand in hand with, like I said, the numbers on the roster limits would potentially have to be, kind of just shuffled around, because, you're talking about, instead of having 100 players, maybe you have 120, and it just gets really weird in that gray area. So, and the idea that Jeff Choate put out was, maybe you just have it cascading down, that, it's a 3 or 4 year process that it takes to get the numbers back to where they would have been pre-pandemic. But it would take that long just to scale out, the effects of kind of this having two classes at once. I mean, college athletics is so built around the premise of like your seniors graduate and move on, and that's how you build your roster. And so this would just totally throw a wrench in that. And so it's kind of challenging for schools, I think, probably to sort through that. And obviously, it would be really unfortunate if the NCAA didn't come out with that rule about the allowing everyone an extra year of eligibility. So that's a great starting point. But then it comes with a lot of other issues that schools need to figure out on their own.
No, it's absolutely the right thing to do. I mean, if you're gonna basically cancel a season, you have to give players an extra year of eligibility. But yeah, it's going to create lots of problems for schools. I read an article. I don't remember where I read it, but potential trickle down where the FBS guys who may be squeezed out are going to look for a new home, transfer to maybe FCS programs. It's going to just squeeze guys out, possibly just because of jamming up the classes. So, not entirely sure how that's all going to work out, but it's very interesting. And I do believe it was the right decision by the NCAA to grant that eligibility.
Right. And like you said, it's just this weird trickle down effect of people getting squeezed out and obviously recruiting, incoming recruits being affected. And it's just there's a lot of sort of side effects of this.
But then you got I guess Troy Anderson was going to redshirt anyway, but now he theoretically would have another redshirt year. Is that how that would work?
Right. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. There's like some weird, there's some weird gray area in that too.
So if he plays like 2 games in the spring, gets hurt, he gets redshirt again. Yeah.
Oh goodness.
Kevin Thompson's going to play forever at this rate, and I know that much.
8th year of eligibility.
Yeah.
Making history right there. All right.
Well,
hey, Paul, we're going to move into our Golden Coolie questions. If you don't know about our Golden Coolies, we have these sweet Golden Coolies, and we opened it up to the Bobcat Nation, the Twitter sphere, our newly debuted website. We'll put that in the show notes, but some guys wrote you a question, and they're just for you, Paul. So we have 3 of them. The first one comes from, I hope I say this right.
Well, the first one we kind of already talked about. That was the, is it possible? Well, actually, I guess, yeah, go ahead. You can go ahead and read it. I don't know how to say his name either. Good luck.
Yeah, so Paul, you can answer this in brevity because you kind of covered it, but it's from Wapiti. I think I say that right.
Yeah, that's what I would have said.
Okay. I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. Here it is. I saw in the news that NDSU and Central Arkansas were scheduling a game this fall. Might MSU schedule a few games this fall, even if it was a scrimmage game against one of the lower division teams in Montana?
Yeah, so kind of, we talked a little bit about it, but he threw a little extra question there, maybe an NAIA game.
So this would not happen, at least based on what MSU has said up to this point.
Kind of what I figured the answer would be there. Kind of covered it. So, all right. Well, this one has nothing to do with football. This is from WBTFG. I know him personally, so I'm going to go ahead and ask the question. He wants to know what your favorite holiday appetizer is.
Holiday. All right. Well, first of all, okay, the lot to sort through on this one because I got to figure out first favorite holiday. What counts as a holiday appetizer?
That's a very good question. I assume he meant like Thanksgiving, but that could very well be an Easter dinner too.
Yeah,
Christmas.
Or Christmas. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. I don't know why, but this is the first thing that popped in my head, so that means that's the answer I gotta go with. I would have to go with pigs in a blanket on 4th of July.
Nice. I like that a lot. That's a good answer.
So confused. Like, do pigs in a blanket on 4th of July go together? I feel like pigs in a blanket go together maybe with
any iteration of a hot dog on 4th of July, I think counts.
It's true.
I won't argue that, Paul.
Are you talking like pancakes here?
No, like the little hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah. Yes. When I worked at a short order cook, and we definitely had like pigs in a blanket. That was like breakfast sausage and a pancake, which is delicious. You like roll it up into in the pancake and just make a little
that's
pancake burrito.
That's a MacGyver version of that.
Yeah, you're talking about like the flaky pastry with the little cocktail weenie in there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, those are great.
We have those every single Super Bowl ever. Those are always on the menu.
Oh, okay. Hey, that counts as a Super Bowl appetizer. That's a holiday too.
I was actually thinking holiday, and I might have to go with jalapeno poppers just based on Super Bowl holiday would be my answer. Jalapeno poppers. I love those things.
Hey, you know what? Speaking of, you said Super Bowl. I don't know. This is a little outside the box, but niche for your audience, I guess. I would say nothing really beats that waking up on the morning of Cat Grizz and drinking a nice cup of hot chocolate.
Yeah, that's a good answer. That is a holiday for sure.
Absolutely, it's a holiday.
Hell yeah.
If you're really holiday, that you need some peppermint schnapps in it, though.
Well, I got to work on Cat Grizz.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Good point, Paul. All right. This one comes from Bobcat99 on Bobcat Nation. Wants to know Paul's thoughts on MSU atmosphere versus Syracuse atmosphere for football.
For football specifically?
Yes,
football
football
that's what
only.
he said. For football specifically.
I would say MSU is superior, and I'll explain why. Because when you have a packed stadium, the atmosphere is better. And so the Carrier Dome in Syracuse holds around 50,000 people for football games, and their average attendance is they fudge their attendance sometimes, but there were a lot of games when I was in college where they had 35,000 people. Maybe some games with more, maybe some games with less, but definitely a lot of empty seats a lot of times, and Syracuse was not that good. I mean, they're still a middling ACC team, which I don't really know where that gets you or what that really accomplishes. Just given the FBS bowl structure. But I mean the difference, I would say, in basketball, men's and women's basketball. Well, actually, women's basketball would be different. The atmosphere at the Brick for women's basketball is really good. Syracuse didn't have as much support for women's basketball, which was really unfortunate considering they've had some really good teams. But men's basketball wise, I mean, the Carrier Dome is filled up. It holds 35,000 people for men's basketball, and you only have half the stadium available. So and it gets really loud, and it's really. I mean, well, I have issues with the Carrier Dome environment for basketball just because the seats are so far away from the court. So it pales in comparison to a lot of other, classic college basketball venues. But for football specifically, when you have a packed stadium, it beats a not packed stadium. So that would be my take on that.
Is there even anywhere to tailgate that's not concrete parking lot?
Yeah, weird issue with Syracuse University's campus is, I mean, it was great as a student because the Carrier Dome was like literally right in the middle of campus, like in between like dorms and classrooms.
That's pretty cool, actually.
But the issue is there's not a ton of parking options, and so a lot of fans actually park like a mile down the road and take a shuttle bus. And so I don't know, when you have to take a shuttle bus in between your tailgate spot and the venue, kind of takes away from it a little bit, I would say. And I mean, there's some really dedicated people, and especially in that area in central New York, basketball specifically, like people like live and breathe like Syracuse basketball. And there's probably just as much tailgating for basketball games as there is for football.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate you answering some of the questions from the Bobcat, our listeners here. So you're a good sport.
Great questions. Shout out to the listeners. Good questions. They brought the heat.
All right, Paul. Well, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you, listen to follow your work on Twitter, read your articles, all that good stuff.
Yeah, best place to read our coverage from me and as well as sports editor Colton Poole is BozemanDailyChronicle.com. Clicking on the sports tab there, and then on Twitter, I'm at pschweds. at PSCHWEDS, and Colton is at Cpool Reporter on Twitter. So those are some of the best places to find us. And always feel free to get in touch. I should add that as well. Always enjoy getting in touch with people, and if they ever have any questions, feel free to reach out.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Paul. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to come onto our show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Paul.
Well, all right. Well, that was Paul Schwedelson of the Bozeman Daily Chronicle, giving us kind of his insights and his knowledge and expertise on basically what's been happening from the NCAA cancellation, the Big Sky Conference, and most importantly to maybe us and to the listeners here, just kind of his pulse on the team inside, like Leon Costello, Jeff Choate's kind of thoughts on the matter, something that maybe not all of us knew, or certainly I didn't know some of the stuff. So it was really good to have him come on and kind of just explain some things.
So, Thorny, the one question that we need to talk about is, do you think the NCAA made the correct decision?
Well, this is such a hard question because I don't even know if they made a decision. So basically, I think a better question is probably, did the Big Sky Conference make the correct decision? I apologize. I did write the NCAA on our little show notes here. The NCAA did not hardly make a decision. They basically just passed the buck over to the conferences and made them choose, and then said, all right, well, we'll do a championship if 50% of you decide to play. So I'm not sure I'd call that a decision necessarily, but at least it was some semblance of a plan. But as far as the Big Sky Conference goes and canceling the season, unfortunately, I do think that they probably did make the right decision. And I can elaborate on that, but I want to get kind of your thoughts first.
Well, I agree with you. I think the Big Sky made the correct decision. I think erring on the caution of safety in this circumstance is the best way to go about this. I mean, whatever you think about the coronavirus and the pandemic is kind of irrelevant. I mean, it is something that is affecting our nation, and it is true that it passes pretty rapidly and fairly efficiently. So to make the choice to postpone fall, I mean, it's a huge decision to make, but I know it wasn't one that it came easily for anybody, especially the NCAA. I mean, obviously they were punting the decision to the conferences, but yeah, Thorny, I agree with you, man. This was the correct choice. I don't think there's going to be spring football because I just don't think this will be solved by then. And another thing, and just in my own personal beliefs, like I don't think having spring football, a season in the spring, would be good for the fall of 2021. So that's what I kind of stand on right now.
There's a lot to unpack there, but I'll give you kind of my thoughts real quick here. I do agree, and there's just so many factors going into the decision. Like, if you're just even take the virus safety concerns aside, how are schools supposed to pay for the testing? Like, it's expensive to get tests. You're gonna have to do it every single game you do. The turnaround time on them required. It's just literally very difficult to do. Some schools, certainly in the conference, not as good financial position as the Montana schools or anything like that. And, honestly, if someone were to contract the virus and die playing football for a school, you don't want to have that press. You don't want to have that happen. Obviously, that's terrible. And you don't want any potential lawsuits that would come from that. It's just a liability issue to me. Like, that's one of the big things I think people kind of gloss over, is like the liability. Like, you don't want to be the school that has it, and you don't want to have to deal with the lawsuits that could come out of something like that. So I think just all sorts of aspects like that, I just think there's just no way you can really safely play the game for your player safety, for your school financial safety. It just seemed like an impossible task.
Yeah, it's not ideal for any of us, for the fans, for the coaches, for the players, but it's necessary for us to get back to where we want to be.
It's breaking my heart, that's for sure. Like you said, big hole in the heart that needs to be filled by football. What am I going to do?
It's kind of like lately, right? You've been thinking about like, man, I should be getting some updates on fall camp and getting ready to go to Gold Rush and getting jazzed for the season. It's just a little bit of a letdown, man. It's been hard.
It's like Paul was talking to us before we started recording that Jeff Choate's man and routine. Well, this is my routine, man. This is the time of year where I start thinking about football. I start gearing up for it. And like, bleh, derailed.
Well, you and I are here for the long haul, and so we will try to keep any news that comes out, making podcasts for you guys to listen to. And so I hope that you stay with us through the quarantine and the off season.
Yeah, we got some ideas for some content. We got a couple episodes we want to record, maybe kind of a favorite player, best player of all time, or maybe even just our time, and then offense, defense, and then maybe just some other best of time things, like what's our favorite game, what's our favorite catch, what's our favorite run of all time by an MSU player. There's lots of stuff we can talk about, but we'll be trying to bring some content throughout this time to maybe fill the hole in everyone's heart that has been vacated.
All right. So last order of business for today is our Golden Coolie questions. And so we solicited Golden Coolie questions for this episode. And again, you can submit those Golden Coolie questions to Bobcat Nation. There will be a reposting of a thread there. But you could also hit us up on the Twitter machine. That's RRCatcast. And also through our new launch website, which is rrcatcast.com. There is a form in there, and you can submit those, and then we'll pick one, and I will be sending you one of the Golden Coolies. So let's get right into it. Rivercat from Bobcat Nation says, if the betting odds were 3-1 that there will not be an 8-game Big Sky season next spring, how would you bet? And he qualifies this. He said, if you bet $100 that there won't be a spring season and you win, you get $133 back. If you bet $100 that there will be a spring season, you will get $300 back. Thorny, how are you going to answer that?
You know what? I'm going to have to. I like the long shot odds of that, but I'm going to have to still take the safe money here, and I'm going to probably bet that there will not be an 8-game Big Sky spring season. I might qualify to say that I don't think MSU will be playing that. As we I asked Paul there at some point if MSU could potentially opt out, even if the Big Sky proceeded ahead. With Jeff Choate's kind of just his thoughts on not wanting to ruin a potential 2021 fall season by putting players at risk or short turnaround, whatever, for kind of a just half-assed spring season. If any school is going to opt out, probably would be Jeff Choate and the Bobcats. So I just don't think that the Bobcats will be playing spring football, at least not an 8-game season. Might play a couple games, couple scrimmages, or a couple money games or something, but I don't think they'll be playing 8 games.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. And I agree with you that that's the correct way to bet this, but I'm going opposite. I'm going for the big money. I want to triple my money. I'm betting there will be a spring season, because if I'm putting 100 down, okay, if I get 133 back, was it really worth it? But if I get 300 back, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're going straight like that, if you're talking about like $100 one way or the other, not a lot of money necessarily. So, but yeah, I'm still taking that $33.
All right.
Rivercat.
Next one is 94 Vegas Cat from Bobcat Nation. Of the 2020 seniors on the roster, how many of them will stay on for 2021?
So before we answer this question, I also want to say that our buddy Pete on Twitter asked us pretty much the same question. If there's no spring season, are there any seniors you see forgoing the extra year granted by the NCAA? So pretty much the same question. If you notice, I timestamped them. I went and looked exactly when they were timestamped. So if we do pick this question, I think we have to give it to Vegas Cat.
Well, Pete's already got it. Golden Coolie.
Yeah. He might be generous enough to defer that over to Vegas Cat anyway. So all right. Well, I was looking through the list of seniors, and unfortunately, I've been having computer issues recording here. I don't have it in front of me, but I really did not see or think of anybody that I thought would potentially opt out. The only guys I could think of were guys that had maybe been in the program. This would be going on like their 6th year, and they hadn't got hardly any playing time. Guys that were just kind of on the bench. Maybe someone like that would just kind of hang the cleats up. I know someone kind of did that, right? Like, was it Andy Austin? Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah.
I think he left the program for like his junior or senior year, didn't he? He was like a walk on. I think he just went to focus on school, or maybe he graduated or something like that. So I mean, there's precedent there, and you're basically just riding along for being a punching bag in in camp and stuff. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's going to leave. I just kind of think the culture that Jeff Choate has built, I don't see guys like opting out to go pursue FBS transfers or anything like that. So I don't see anyone foregoing either opting out of football or transferring somewhere. I don't really see it. Unless it's, like I said, maybe some guy who wasn't seeing any playing time.
Well, do you think it could be maybe they would want to go to the NFL?
I don't foresee any of the seniors getting that good of an opportunity to go to the NFL by basically declaring early in a way.
Yeah. No, I think it goes back to the culture thing. I think the culture is so strong at Montana State right now that it's like the family, like you don't want to leave your brothers. And so it would be hard for me to see anybody opting out rather than maybe someone who's a strong academic, or like you said, maybe he's just not getting enough playing time, might want to test the water somewhere else. But no one comes to the top of my mind.
No, I can't see any one of the projected starters not playing football in fall 2021.
The one though, probably the most famous Bobcat right now, Troy Anderson, would be one to consider. I mean, he certainly could flourish on a FBS program. Would he take that chance?
That's a good question. I don't think he would. If someone came calling, I'm sure someone has come calling. I'm guessing he's been courted or has received some interest for some FBS programs, but I just don't see Troy Anderson leaving Montana football, just like playing football in Montana. I just don't see him leaving that for an NFL chance and really with his injuries the last few years, he just hasn't had like a complete season for a while. And I think he still would have more to prove if he wanted to be able to just easily transition to the NFL. So I don't see him doing that, but I guess he would probably be one of the highest candidates of guys that are projected starters.
Yeah, I just think he loves Montana State too much. At least I believe that in my heart.
That's what I tell myself. Did you see that cool video that MSU Bobcat football put out today?
Man, they have some good edits, don't they?
Yeah. If you're not familiar, it's one where it's a compilation of Troy Anderson doing Troy Anderson things. And I'm not familiar with the movie. Do you know what movie that is?
No, I
have no idea what it was, but it was just a funny, like he can kick, he'll go wash your clothes and do your laundry. Oh, and the very end, he can throw too. And they finally show the very last clip is Troy Anderson throwing a touchdown to Travis Johnson. So it was a pretty good video. It was in response to Sam Herder saying Troy Anderson is the best number 15 in the country. Put out that tweet. He's been doing the countdown of the best number players wearing that number around the number 15. So it's a pretty good tweet, but it's just Troy Anderson news there, I guess.
I like you're saying Troy Anderson doing Troy Anderson things.
But what else is there to say about it?
Yeah. All right, man. Last Golden Coolie question. Bozone Cat from Bobcat Nation. And this is a good one. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around, does Robbie Houck get credited for another tackle?
Absolutely, he does. He might even get a sack on that one. I don't know if the tree was behind the line of scrimmage, it's a sack.
I was going to say he's splitting it with Dante Olson.
Yeah, Dante Olson is still getting tackles credit. Like the ticker's still going up. He's got the Dante Olson effect. But now that Dante Olson is graduated, we got to pick on someone else for their higher than you might be expected tackle count. So Houck is the one. Yeah, he's going to be the subject of the butt of the jokes of all season about the tackle counts.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Thorny. Those are our Golden Coolie questions. Thanks for submitting those. I have mine. I'm going to choose. Do you think you got one?
I'm going to let you go first.
Okay, I'm going to go with 94 Vegas Cat. Of the 2020 seniors on the roster, how many of them will stay on for 2021?
It's a good question. That was going to be my pick. I was wondering if you'd go for the comedy angle with the Boson Cat, Robbie Howe question, but no, I think the Vegas Cat wins this one, and let's give him a round of applause. It's been a while.
Woo! Vegas Cat! Well done, buddy.
It's therapeutic to do that clapping and hollering there. We haven't done a Cooley Award in a while.
Oh, man.
When was the last time?
It's been probably 6 months. It feels like that long.
Well, good job, Vegas Cat. Appreciate the question. Appreciate all the questions. As always, just appreciate you guys listening and just sticking with us through these not so fun football times.
All right, Thorny, take us out, buddy.
All right. Well, once again, I want to thank Jeremiah Johnson Brewing for being our sponsor. I also want to say, if you haven't checked out our interview we released, what was it, last week with Kevin Cassis? That was a good interview.
Yeah.
Check us out on Twitter, like Foley said, RRCatcast. Check out the new website, rrcatcast.com. And as always, please like, rate, subscribe, all that fun stuff that people do with podcasts and whatnot. So, all right, Foley, well, let's end this one with the Go Cats.
Go Cats.
All right. I got places to be.